Hi, this is Greg Jeffers for the Flyover Land podcast in Shady Grove, USA. Today I'm going to examine some clips from, well, among others, a podcaster named Aaron Clarey. I don't know that much about him. He calls himself Cappy, that's his nickname, and says he's an economist and former financial planner or financial advisor. He has a large following of young men and is well supported in his community. And while I think he is he's hard to like. I mean, he's a sarcastic, obnoxious, vulgar, and coarse, but his ideas have merit and are worth hearing. Now, the name of this particular show on Aaron Clarey's channel is Men Can No Longer Afford to Support Women. And his opening gambit, and I'm about to play it for you, he's kind of eclectic. He jumps all over the place. But his opening gambit is that only about 10% of urban men can afford to support a wife and family in the urban environment, as defined by women's expectations.
Will get to work and toil unless you are one of the few exceptionally lucky girls or hardworking girls that manage to snag one of these very now ultra wealthy men who post-tax still have the money left over to afford to take care of you, let alone any other children you want. But and I'd have to run the numbers and look at cost of living and how many kids and all, but just a ballpark estimate, we're talking less than 1 in 10 men. Less than 1 in 10. And by the way, it's not like, just so you know, for the ladies who would like to be traditionalists and you would like to be at home and put on the French maid outfit and make cookies. For those of you who are thinking like, well, I'll get the traditional guy. I'll do it by just, dressing up nice and being the June Cleaver. No. All the women are competing for those guys, including the gals who don't care to get married. And these guys, especially if they're good looking, they got all the choice in the world.
And it's strange that Carey seems to think or use the term ultra wealthy men to define the men making $150,000 a year or about the top 10%. It's a great income. It will barely support a family in most of middle America, and it definitely will not support a family very well in New York, Palm Beach County, LA, the major, very appealing metro centers. But that's the number he's using, and I think that's probably about right for the top 10%.
But what you've been telling men, you, the communal you, the universal you, as I mean women in general in the United States and the West in general, but not maybe individually you. What message have you sent these young men now who are in their 30s, 40s, these up-and-coming guys who are starting to make this kind of money? What have you told them? Or heaven forbid, what have you told the average 20-something male in the United States today about how much? Think about this. How much have you told them you love them and support them and really appreciate men and God, men are great and they're really, you can't wait to find a guy and you just love set men. Where was that? Where were those? I didn't get that memo. Did any of you guys get a memo? Guys in the chat room. One, if you got that memo about how much women like you and how supportive and just great you are for society. 0 if you got the complete opposite.
And I looked at the response in the chat room, and dozens of men came up with a 0.
So now you have this demoralization. You have not encouraged men at all. You have done the opposite of being kind, sweet, supporting, championing, or just liking guys. Maybe in private closed doors you might like guys, but the public face, the universal organization, American women, Western women have the official stance you have presented to men is that they are definitely not needed, generally not wanted. Some of you hate them, and they're the cause of all your problems.
Well, given that, Is it any wonder that women find the bottom 90% of men unappealing?
I don't know. I'm not gonna go see the Barbie movie, but I guess the reviews. I mean, that looks like that. Look at Barbie for better or worse. Maybe go see it, and then you look at that and you see what kind of message did we just tell men last week? What did we tell men last week? So now you got this ballpark 10% who can support a wife. What percentage of them want to? What percentage are like, hell no? You know, the meme, the guy with the crown, he's just holding his money like that. What percentage of men are like that? They got the money. And this is another thing. I know, it's anecdotal, but in having clients, I'm of the age where the guys my age we're in our prime income earning years, some of which have obviously been divorced. These guys are not getting married.
And vis-a-vis fertility, it doesn't really matter. If these men are, in their well into their 30s and 40s, and are marrying women over the age of 30, and half of women over 30, if they're childless on their 30th birthday, will never become a mother, what's the point? It doesn't solve the fertility problem. It might solve some other social problem of caring for women or supporting each other, but it doesn't solve the fertility problem.
Presumably to have children later. I think it's 2019 that for the first time ever, more women had children over the age of 40 than under the age of 20.
And it doesn't solve the seasonality problem of life either. We have to contend with mortality. Women having children in their 40s means that 22, 23% of those children will not have their mother come their early 20s. And for a significant and very unfortunate percentage of those people, the loss of their mother will come much earlier.
I'm even including the sheepish, quiet ones who don't have the bravery, courage, or independence to declare to the public that, no, I want to stay at home and be a mom and make the cookies. 1 in 5. I'm going to say 1 in 5, 20% of you. I'd say 1% of the men out there you are capable and willing to do it, and that you concurrently would settle for the public shame that would come with being married to a plumber or an engineer or a boring accountant. And how dare you be the stay-at-home wife? How dare you betray the sisterhood? So we're talking a 1%, which means out of the 20% of you girls who secretly or publicly want to be a stay-at-home, you want the traditional thing, that 1% of guys covered 20% of girls. 95% of you, 95% of you who want the traditional life, you are not going to get it.
I don't know about the math here. We're talking intersecting sets, so it's probably not exact. I think his ideas have merit. They're close enough, and he makes a good point. And let's leave it at
that. You will exist and toil for the rest of your life, and you will work until you are dead, or you can no longer work, like, you're injured or you have a stroke. And I don't want to think about the last several years of your life like that, because you'll be at the mercy of charity and everyone else. You will be effectively a white-collar panhandler. You'll be in a government nursing home. That's what you voted for.
The end game for childless and familyless feminists is bleak. Just bleak. I use the term that they'll be stacked up like cordwood in nursing homes in a generation. It's to be avoided at all costs. People, when you're young and wonderful, everybody wants to know you and wants to have you in their life. And the only people who care about old people is their family. It's something that the femsexists just don't talk about, but it is going to be a monumental problem in the years to come.
I have relatives of mine who are doctors. You work really hard at school. You then go to university. Then you then have to go through medical school. You have to qualify. And by the time you've done all of your exams, you're in your early 30s, mid 30s, and you've pretty much just started your career. And then you have to go, oh, right, now I have to think about kids. It's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge. And you wonder, what are we going to do to be able to actually overcome this challenge? And do we just need to start talking more honestly about female biology?
Talking about it isn't going to change a dang thing. We are stuck now in this cultural existence, and undoing it is going to take another generation, 2, and perhaps 3. There will be some serious and deleterious effects on people's lives that they're going to be shocking. Urbanization. We have urbanized in the West over the past 80, 100 years. It's been a little slower for France, the United States, and some other Western countries, and it has been at a blistering pace in China. But China's about to lose half of their population within 30 years. Now, what that means for their real estate market, for their banking system, for a lot of things, it's hard to even describe. But I tend to stay away from macro solutions to macro problems. I like to talk about macro problems and focus on micro solutions. If the urban environment continues to produce women or continues to produce people that don't produce children, the urban environment will collapse. That's just mathematics, medical fact, whatever you want to call this. This will happen. So either they'll start to produce children, which I doubt, or that collapse will take place and we will reorganize someplace else, which I think is most likely. And the reason I doubt it is that in every urban environment the world over, the fertility rate is far below replacement rate. That environment is not conducive to forming long-term relationships that produce children and raising children. There's something about small apartments that make people not want to reproduce. And as this fellow Aaron Clary points out, only 10% of the urban male population can provide a lifestyle such that women would want to raise a family with him in that environment. Everybody else think about the people living in the lesser neighborhoods of Brooklyn, Queens, and Upper Manhattan. They have a very challenged, or perceive themselves as having a very challenged life, compared to those who are in the top percent who they perceive as being very privileged. Now, for the past 3 or 4 generations, the urban centers have gotten away with very low fertility because they were able to import adults, replacement adults, from the hinterlands, from rural America or from international immigration. But those sources are drying up. The people in rural America are not producing enough children to fulfill or to meet the need of the urban centers, and the reproductive rate in the rest of the world has declined to the point where it's unlikely that those people will abandon their parents. There's no excess sons to go around. In the past, the people who moved were the 3rd, 4th, and 5th sons. I'm a 5th son. I understand this issue. First sons who are going to inherit and whom the parents need in their old age are much less likely to abandon their families and move across the world. And that's where we are.
That when heterosexual women...
Weinstein has the courage and the gravitas to make this distinction. Heterosexual women are being unduly influenced by non-heterosexual women who do not wish to produce children at the university industrial complex. There's no other way to say it. There it is.
Realize that they have several possible life cycles and they don't have a clear sense of which one they will actually live. Am I going to get married and raise children and be at home with the children? Am I going to get married and have one child, maybe two, and be a career person? Am I never going to couple but have children? Am I going to have no children whatsoever? Am I going to do that in a coupled situation?
Yep. Yep.
Their decision trees blow out as to what it is that they're actually looking for.
And there it is. Now we're getting down to brass tacks. Women have to decide what it is they are looking for before their fertility window closes in their late 20s to early 30s. And that's not happening. Now, it will correct one way or another, but will it correct in time to save your family, your church group, your community from going extinct or not? Because that's the situation. If it takes your personal investment in this 2 or 3 generations, well, then you're doomed. You're out of the gene pool. Goodbye. If you can solve it now before your children do not produce children, well, then your line will endure. And it's as simple as that.
Because reproductive success, in terms of evolution, the only thing that's important is reproductive success. How many kids are you having? Are they surviving? Are they themselves reproducing? Okay.
In terms of evolution, the only thing that matters is reproductive success. How many children are you having? Are they surviving? And are they reproducing themselves? Well, there's a big segment now in control of the university industrial complex, women, who experience an existential disgust response to men, maleness, and masculinity so severe that it prevents them from reproducing. Do you want your daughters influenced by that demographic? And that's not a moral judgment directed at the women suffering from female heterosexual dysphoria, a term I coined for my book, Stones in the Garden. That's how they were set at the factory. This is their life, and they're free to live it. But their influence on heterosexual women at the university is such that it is lasting. Their influence is lasting past the window of fertility for the heterosexual women who probably would like to have children. And I think that influence is having a negative effect on heterosexual women's fertility.
Going back to what you said about status,
Yeah.
and how status provides a incentive for people to behave in particular ways that allow them to advertise their fancy trip to Bali and brunch and whatever on a Sunday on social media. Have you considered a way of reprogramming statusful activities so that motherhood becomes pedestalized again?
I hate to say this, but I think for most of the population, people are like, oh, why don't you force them to? Like, I talk with some people and they're like, well, what about like banning porn or banning, whatever, right? Like, would that force people to do this? And it's like, look, or banning social media, right? The cultural groups and people who aren't resistant to the existing pressures in this world that are sterilizing them, unfortunately, they're just kind of a lost cause. What we need to do is we need to find the few groups that have found a way to make themselves resistant to this and sort of nurture them.
Fair enough. But I think I know quite a few men who would like to see their daughters become mothers and are not willing to give up on them so easily and just nurture these other groups that, again, this is, I'm speaking about the individual here, not this group identity thing.
And one of my strong senses is that women encountered something they weren't expecting, which is that they might even be smarter than the guy at work who they're competing with, but he's happy to come in all of Saturday, all of Sunday, and work hours that are completely psychotic.
Yes, but unfortunately, these women are learning this post their fertility window. If they're 32, 33 before they figure out that they really don't want to live like this, well, for probably 75% of them, it's too late.
And so then the idea of, well, we need work-life balance. We don't want people coming in on Friday and Saturday because that's sort of an unfair advantage that somebody who wants a healthy life is different from somebody who wants an extreme life. And so now you have this problem, which is I'm attracted to the sort of man I wouldn't want to compete with at work. If I'm going to be in the office, I want to know that I'm not going to have to deal with the guy who's willing to give up every weekend and work hours that I'm unwilling to work because that's not how I'm set at the factory. Versus, I want that guy as the go-getter while I'm pregnant and incapacitated and raising children to make sure that not only he can shepherd our family through anything because he's highly capable, but can also get me back into the workforce when I'm done raising children. And this is somewhat what I believe is responsible for the sort of incoherent messages that men and women are sending to each other, is that when we don't know what life cycle we are going to be inhabiting, our eroticism and our romance and our desire is unstable.
Yes, Eric Weinstein is a world-class genius. But in this case, what you're hearing is the experiences of a father who has raised a daughter all the way through to adulthood and has her best interests at heart. And that's not what you're hearing from the femsexists running the university industrial complex and influencing young women.
And that the truth is what is correct is whatever ends up working in the long term for human civilization, because nothing is really working right now.
Nothing is working right now. And that's because we have over-urbanized. We've reached the tipping point, and we now are sure worldwide that urban environments are not conducive to the production of children. When people move to the city, when they move to smaller apartments, when they move to more expensive living conditions, they stop having children. And maybe it might be as simple as they put off having children, and then the women's fertility window closes and it's all over. We're not really sure, but we do know without a shadow of a doubt that as we moved from the country into urban environments, the fertility went off a cliff. And so that's not sustainable. It lasts for a generation and a half, and then it implodes. So one way or another, this situation will correct itself. The only question is, will your family survive it? And will our daughters be condemned to a pathetic and meaningless old age? Because that is the fate that awaits the femsexists. That's the condition of their existence. But that doesn't have to be a condition of existence for our children. Anyway, that's enough for me today. Thank you. I'm Greg Jeffers for the American Quaker Friends Church.
Just gonna do this road in lunch, or?
Yes.
Mom.
Yeah.